Executive Edge Live panel. I'm Harley Green, the founder and CEO of Workergenix, where we help executives and leadership teams stay focused on high-impact activities by delegating the rest to highly skilled, AI-leveraged ultimate executive assistants. Today's conversation is going to tackle one of the biggest challenges in leadership: how to build a self-managing team that truly thinks and acts like owners. Now, in your business, you've hired some great people, but you still seem to be the bottleneck for decisions, approvals, or the accountability. Your business is just not scalable yet. So this session with these expert panelists is going to cover that. We're going to talk about shifting from managing tasks to empowering ownership. Our incredible panelists today are going to share proven ways to build trust, accountability, and initiative inside your team so you can focus on strategy, growth, and innovation. I'd like to welcome our panelists to the Executive Edge Live. We're going to go around and just give everyone a chance to introduce themselves, starting with Christina.
Hi all, it's great to be here. My name is Christina and I am the founder of Karchik Partners. And what we do is we're pretty much your HR on demand. The sooner you bring us in, the better we are because we help you grow and scale sustainably. So typically I am in the tech sector. That's where I like to be most, making sure that founders aren't founders for a phase or two, but they're there for the longevity by setting them up for success early on. That's
awesome.
me.
Thank you, Christina. All right, Alex, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Otero, the Director of Human Resources for the Academy, community-based services. So just like Christina, I've spent the majority of my career in the tech sector, but decided to pivot, and we're really focused on making sure that we're helping local youth here in southeastern Pennsylvania in particular, get to the places that they need to be. So yeah, very excited to be here.
All right, thank you, Alex. Next, we'll jump over to Dr. Lori.
Everyone. So I'm the Assistant Director of Industry Partnerships at Metropolitan State University of Denver. I have a mentorship program where I connect students with industry professionals to gain essential skills. I'm also a professor of psychology. I'm an advisor with different programs. I collaborate with student veterans. So grateful to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Lori. And last but certainly not least, Joanna.
Hi, everyone. I'm also glad to be here. I'm with Elevanti HR. I'm the owner and founder. We're a boutique HR firm, and our core competency is providing compliance and efficiency audits and assessments for companies and offering fractional HR leadership to support businesses in making the changes necessary to be sustainable and successful with purpose, systems, and really a level of experience that allows you to get there very quickly.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanna. I am really excited for the conversation today. We've got a panelist with rich knowledge of managing people and leadership. So let's dive right in. This is going to be an open question to everyone on the panel. If you've got a thought on it, feel free to jump in with it, what you'd like to share. The question is, what does a self-managing team mean to you? And why is it so critical for scaling a business today?
I'm happy to jump in there, Harley. I believe a self-managing team is one that operates with shared trust, clarity, and accountability. And what I mean by that is that every member knows the mission, the measures, the authority that they hold to make decisions. And I believe that really the true scalability doesn't depend on how many people report up. It depends on how many people can think forward.
Well said.
Powerful.
I can jump in there too because I agree with everything you said. In addition, agility and innovation are absolutely non-negotiable in this as well. Therefore, self-managing teams are critical because they decentralize decision-making. They also provide the opportunity to push ownership closer to the work and the customer. So to me, the structure allows teams to respond faster to client needs, iterate on solutions in real time, and innovate, most importantly, without waiting for top-down direction.
I'd agree with that, actually. I mean, both fantastic answers. The one thing that I would add to that is that, self-managing teams in particular, they need to connect with their vision and the results of, what they're doing. And, all the self-managing teams that I've seen, and I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit, they understand and connect their work and their team's work with the results and the vision that they're trying to attain from a company standpoint, which ultimately, differentiates them from teams that have not connected with that.
Dr. Lori, do you want to give you a chance, or you good on this one?
I don't know. Everybody said all the answers have been so good. I'm like, how do I add to that? I guess the only thing that I'll add is that I just feel that when you have a self-managing team, everyone needs to be seen, heard, and valued. And if you do those three things, I think it just allows everything to work smoother. So, but I agree with all my colleagues.
Yeah, excellent insights. And just from my personal experience in business, it's so true. Everything that's been shared here, getting clear on your mission, vision, and values is so helpful because it just makes sure everyone's rowing in the same direction, and it makes that decision-making process for everybody so much easier. Christina, going back to you, you've helped leaders build organizations that run on trust and alignment. What would you say is the first mindset shift that a founder or executive needs to make to stop being that bottleneck we've talked about?
Mindset shift is important, but I do want to emphasize before you get there that you first have to make the investment in operational model and org design, and then you can shift over. Without that clarity, you won't be able to be proactive, you will be reactive. And then for me, in particular, you have to focus on shifting, if necessary, from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And the truth is, most of us start with a fixed mindset because you're constantly reacting to the chaos, right? But that's why I say the organizational design and the operating model help alleviate that chaos, and then you can jump right into ensuring that they have that growth mindset. Because if they don't have that growth mindset, forget about it. Nothing else is going to stick, right?
Absolutely. All right. Alex, you've built HR structures through high growth phases. What are some systems and frameworks that help teams take ownership without losing the accountability?
I love systems and frameworks questions. Christina, we're kind of in sync on a lot of what we're saying, because I think that, these two questions that, came first, they can happen, but they can't happen in a vacuum. And the reason I say that is, when you ask about systems and frameworks, like my mind immediately goes to OKRs. That's the first one that, most leaders, most managers would think of, is they're like, and the ones that they're most familiar with. I have OKRs, I have a hand in creating them, and to a certain extent, they really annoy me sometimes. Everybody has mixed feelings about those OKRs, and then within those, you can break down into like the project management frameworks like RACI and DACI, and making sure that you're assigning the right roles to the right people. But at the end of the day, none of that really ultimately matters if you can't figure out what you're working towards. And so specifically jumping back to OKRs, again, it's a deceptively simple, system for figuring out, what your, of course, objectives and key results are. But it's something that people tend to often throw off to the side. And so spending a lot of time on figuring out like what your goal as a company is, what your, are your goals aligning with your vision? And then as a manager or even as an individual contributor, what am I doing, and can I connect that back to that vision through these frameworks is the key. So, oftentimes people tend to just get bogged down in like hitting an OKR so that they can get a bonus. Somebody gets a little bit too bogged down in being part of, say, like the responsible party or the contributor in one of these frameworks, that they forget what the overall purpose of it is. And so, it's as simple as having a candid conversation with a leadership group or an entire company, depending on its size, to figure out exactly what we're working towards, like what's our common goal and how are we going to get there.
Awesome. There's a lot of great insights there. Anybody else have anything to add? I know Alex covered a lot of ground there. All right. Well, Dr. Lori, your research has kind of focused on the emotional intelligence and belonging. How do these qualities influence a team's ability to self-manage and lead from within?
That's a great question. I feel like lately, a lot of organizations that I've been seeking out my services as a consultant, and to do trainings, have really embraced different concepts like the 5 love languages of appreciation in the workplace, and looking at the unique ways, like as I had said earlier, people feel valued, and really in thinking of teams and the uniqueness, even when they're self-managed, just embracing um, everyone's unique personality. So, like, for example, I give sometimes the Myers-Briggs assessment personality test and separate everyone in the group depending on their personality. And I tell them what their Star Wars character is based on their personality. And then we watch a clip from the movie, and I'm like, all right, how did your characters critically solve that problem? How did they use critical thinking skills to solve that problem? So, like, for example, if Yoda solves it different than C3PO, but we need everybody. So we need processors on the team. We need, and then I use superheroes with the Clifton Strengths assessment, and I'm an executor. So like I'm like, all right, let's just do it. Like right away, I want to go. And the disc, I'm a D. I'm like, but I need people to say, Lori, calm down. We need to like think about the whole situation. I know you want to do it yesterday, but we need to reflect on it. So just getting teams and organizations to understand that we need a little bit of everyone on the team. It can't just be one or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I especially love the Star Wars character reference. That really helps people kind of drive it home and relate, especially to maybe some of those other personalities that they're not as familiar with or wouldn't necessarily be able to define as well. But when they see it in their favorite Star Wars character, then it really becomes clear. It's a great idea. All right. Well,
I'll just
Joanna.
add,
Oh, go ahead,
I'm so
Christina.
sorry. I was just going to add, I love that. And to me, what I think is so beautiful about it is you're really allowing people to embrace who they are and bring their authentic self, but also while recognizing that everyone should not be the same. You need the balance of, at the end of the day, that's true diversity, right? That's really going to drive the innovation. So I absolutely love that. I had to just let you know.
Yeah, I love that as well. And I just want to add that I think it also creates psychological safety and modeling empathy in action, which is so important because when your team feels seen and they feel valued and trusted, they're naturally going to begin leading from within, which is that ownership mindset. And I think that's where that true self management begins. I love what you're doing. That's amazing.
Well, Joanna, I think that segues perfectly into the next question that I had for you is, you're specializing with aligning HR
Mhm.
systems and operational excellence. What are the practical steps that leaders can take to embed ownership into that team culture?
It's a great question. For me, embedding ownership starts with the principles of present leadership. And what that means is showing up whole and building the bridge of trust and stewarding the assignment with excellence. Leaders have to start with clarity, they have to define expectations. And one of my favorite is giving them decision rights. When people know what their authorities are, they understand their boundaries and they can act. And so when people see, and also when people see how their work ties to something meaningful, they begin to take ownership naturally. And the final step is modeling it. When leaders are consistent, when they're present, when they're transparent, they set a culture where accountability feels shared, not enforced.
Could you talk a little bit more about the decision rights? I'm really curious on that.
Absolutely.
Are there some practical tips for kind of
Mhm.
helping a leader define how to even get started there? Because there's so many areas where you could possibly define, and it could be overwhelming. I'd love to hear your tips on that.
Yes, and the simple answer is it starts with job descriptions. In the job descriptions, we normally see KSAs or KSCs, which is knowledge, skills, experience, or knowledge, skills, and abilities. But if we could put inside that job description, here are the things that we expect you to do, and here are the authorities that we're giving you. It could be as simple as you can spend up to $10,000 without taking anything in front of your a project committee, If you feel like that $10,000 is going to achieve the result that comes from our strategic plan as an organization, and you play a role in that, and it falls within your accountability, you have the authority. For example, if Christina and I work together, in that job description, it would tell me that I have the authority to work with her in collaboration. And so that tells me I don't have to go through a hierarchical process. I can go straight to Christina with the problem that I have that aligns with her job description, and we can solve that together. And the second part of that is a RACI, and Alex made mention of that earlier. That is a very effective tool, and it allows people to collaborate safely and not feel like they're stepping on each other's toes, understanding where their responsibilities are, and when they are simply someone who needs to be informed, as an example. But that is the most simple way that everyone can start today, is just adding that one section of, here are your responsibilities. Now, here is the authority that I'm offering you. And then that allows me as a leader to not bark instructions at you all day, but to rather manage the results and ensure that you're utilizing and applying that authority in the way that's going to achieve the outcomes that we want as an organization.
I love
Just to
that. It's
piggyback
just
off
one
of that
simple
real
thing
quick.
you can add. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, Harley.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So the one thing, and that was fantastic, just description of how we can empower managers with decision rights that, let's face it, aren't going to make or break the business. And that's the big issue, especially when you're dealing with, say, like founder CEOs who are used to having a lot of the authority, and you're taking something that they've brought up from inception, but a big, like, major sticking point for a lot of individuals to, say, new managers or people who maybe have been managers for a long time and haven't had those decision rights that Joanna was talking about, is understanding what the outcomes of accountability actually are. So oftentimes people will think, hey, if I mess up, well, then I lose my job. That's the unfortunate, some of the unfortunate realities that we're dealing with in this market. And that's a different conversation for a different day. But you can create an environment as a leader where people can feel comfortable with working on something, making a decision, and potentially failing, while knowing that you may look to somebody else to potentially help them to take on that project without them affecting their long-term outlook in that role. There's a lot of people love ownership. They're really scared of accountability because because nobody's taken the time to explain to them that accountability doesn't always mean you fail and you're no longer in that job. And it's an unfortunate issue that is oftentimes not confronted in most businesses.
Yeah, I'll just add, just piggyback on what Alex said. I love that, what you said about the failure part. There's a book by John Maxwell called Failing Forward. And the main thing of the book is that in life, the most successful people are not necessarily the richest people, the smartest people, the most good looking people. They're the people that when they fail, they don't focus on that, they move forward. And I think us talking about that is can really help our teams feel more comfortable in embracing the fact that we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for direction.
I love what you all have said. And just to quickly sum it up, at the end of the day, a lot of innovation comes from failure, right? So not giving that space, you're losing out on creativity and innovation.
And these are excellent points. As founders or leaders in business, you're allowed to fail, and you fail a lot, and it's encouraged, just like the book Dr. Lori was referenced. So it's excellent to think about that from a context of the employees, and if they want to think like leaders too, they need to have that space. So I appreciate you pointing that out, Alex, as well. Next question for the group. Many executives struggle to let go of control. How can they build trust without losing visibility or quality? Anyone's welcome to jump in.
I'll jump in. I think, Joanna, you answered a lot of this in your prior question. I feel like you addressed it. And then honestly, Alex, what your follow-up, it was perfect. I think really when you're talking about this, one of the really important things is, believe it or not, taking a step back and ensuring that you have the right IT and security infrastructure, which sometimes if you're an early stage startup, this goes as like, hey, you know what, we can deal with this later. Never mind the actual cost that that adds up to. But the reason why that becomes so critical in this situation is that you allow leaders to have the insight and the data to monitor things, because it is critical when building to be able to stop when things don't look right and go deep as an executive, as a leader. And you're able to do that with the right infrastructure. How many of us have been part of an organization and trying to get that information is like, it's painful. So we can't expect leaders not to be able to go deep unless they have that. And secondly, I'll just say, going back, I'm going to sound like a broken record, that org design, and going exactly back to what Joanna says, if you don't define the roles and responsibilities, don't forget about it. Your org design goes out the window. But understanding who the founders are and building around it. And I'll use the example, like oftentimes you have a founder that's a visionary, then you need an integrator, right? And just thinking through that, but combined with everything you all three have said, I think collectively, that's how you answer that.
That's so good.
That's well answered, and I agree. I think the previous answers have covered a lot of this as well. So next
I
question
will
I have
add
for the
one more
group.
thing. I'm sorry, Harley. I
Oh,
will add
yeah,
one more
no.
thing, because I think it's important. Executives can also create visibility through dashboards and milestone reviews. And that's one way that they can let go of that control. So they don't always need to be right next to the task, but they can have, I often call them toll gates, as often as they want. That could be once a week or once a month. Alex mentioned new managers. Maybe they need to be checked in with more often. But there could be a rhythm to each project that is assigned. That's another way to gain control, is to create an actual task where you state, just like what it sounds like, you state what the task is, what that statement of work is, what their boundaries are, what their authorities, their budget, all of those things. But then you also build into that a check-in, a toll gate, so that you can sit with that employee and you feel then they have the power to course correct and or add value, while still encouraging them to have the team member to have creativity and be innovative.
Let's not forget that there's also we could talk, 10,000 feet, 100,000 feet, doesn't really matter. These are still people we're talking about. And oftentimes, there are not necessarily personal matters, but, everybody's personality is different. Like Dr. Laurie was saying about it earlier. And so people are going to clash. People are going to think differently about, how to approach a task. And sometimes it's truly as easy, especially with executives or maybe senior level managers who have been in a role for a long time, for them to go through an exercise of writing down why a specific thing is bothering them or why they feel the need to have a piece of information. If they can't answer that in 10 seconds, it requires them to dig a little bit deeper and understand, hey, maybe I don't need to be attached to this. And then it could be as simple as what Joanna was saying with a dashboard. And dashboards fix a lot. They fix a lot because more often than not, people don't want a dissertation on the information that they're seeking. They just want a quick snapshot. But it's incumbent upon them, or whoever's enabling that behavior or trying to fix it, to help them say, hey, why is this a roadblock for you? Why is it an issue? Why are you angry about it? There's a lot of why behind it.
I really appreciate that what you brought up there, Alex, with like the information access. I think that's something a lot of times people don't think about in the time to like cut things. And I experienced that just this week. There's an email group we use internally that's related to marketing. And I was like, you know what? I actually don't ever take action on any of these emails. I don't need to. I've got my team handling them. So I'll just remove myself from that group. And now my inbox is that much more clear, so I can really stay focused on the things that I do need to focus on and respond to. So one other question I kind of wanted to follow up, because the next one was about the communication. We've been talking about that. Do you guys have any advice or specific frameworks that you particularly like for enabling that communication and feedback? We talked about, having the tasks and setting outlines. Are there any, frameworks that you you swear by or recommend that people use to really enable that strong communication to have the self-managing team?
I guess I'll say something real quick. I think trust is so important. I think visibility is really important as well. And I know that it's a challenge at so many companies now because there's people working remote, there's people working in person, there's the whole AI situation. And so I think we have to be intentional about continuing to develop those relationships with those people on our team so that that trust is there, because without trust it's really hard to have communication. And I'll use a quick example of myself. So my parents passed away. They were diagnosed with cancer, first my mom, and then my dad. And at the time when my mom was diagnosed, I was at another university and I was quickly moving up. And my dad called me up and he was like, "Hey, what's it going to take for you to come home and help me with your mom?" This is before he got cancer. He's like, "This is too much." So I had to take FMLA. So I had to meet with HR people, like my colleagues, here. And really, because I trusted HR, I was able to be honest. And I was like, what's the best thing? Do I quit? Should I just quit? Should I do FMLA? I ended up doing FMLA. I honestly did end up quitting because when my dad got diagnosed after my mom passed away, it was too much. But I just say that if it had not been for the trust that was developed, I would have probably not even told them. I would have just quit and not given a reason, and they would have had no idea what was going on.
Right. Yeah, I think we see that a lot of times if employees are not thinking the same way as business leaders in most circumstances. And so things that business leaders might take for granted, like, of course you come and talk to HR if you've got a problem, is not necessarily what employees think by default when they are in that stressful situation. And of course, the stress doesn't help in making wise decisions either.
So agree. I think the other piece to it as well is learning and development, right? I would love to say that everybody knows how to do these things, but truth is we don't. I mean, even if you think of active listening, which is a key part of this, right? For leaders, but other team members, we're taught to listen, to respond, listen to defend. We're not taught to listen to actually listen. So I think just developing those key competencies, feedback, and so forth. And then again, I know I always go back to that operating model, but what's the expectation for communication? Who are my key stakeholders? Exactly what you three have said. So I don't want to take credit for it. Who's the owners? Who do I need to work with? Defining all of that enables communication and feedback, which is critical because self-managing teams cannot function without those two effectively. But it goes back to your leadership development, your overall development plan for your employees, and providing that training.
This next question is kind of going the opposite direction. I'm curious to hear if you guys have examples of this that can share and speak to. And the question is, how can leaders identify when they're accidentally disempowering their team, and what can they do to reverse that pattern?
I absolutely love this question because I think that leaders disempower their teams without realizing it. And they do that by usually, first of all, really tight agendas, not creating enough space for people to share their thoughts, answer questions. Most leaders forget to go into inquiry mode when they're inside a meeting and they're just speaking, which we can do by recording a video or we can do through an email, right? But mostly, from my perspective, I've been in HR for 28 years. The root cause is usually over-directing, overcorrecting, and withholding context. That's been my experience. And you'll see it, the way you notice that is when teams become hesitant. We kind of talked about that a little bit. They get quiet. But the one that's not so obvious, Alex, you were talking about newer managers. It took me a really long time to learn this, is they become dependent on you for every decision. I used to see that as a compliment. that my employees would come to me and ask me so many questions. I felt so useful, but I realized it was not exactly a good thing. To answer your question, though, to reverse that, I think you need to create the space for contribution. Ask questions instead of giving answers. One trick that I use for that, all of us on this panel are very experienced. We have a lot of answers. Is I will try to limit myself to giving 2 answers. Everything else I will write down in my notebook, and I will hold them for a different conversation so that I can create that space for what I just referred to, them asking questions and contributing.
Joanna, you said something in there that really just light bulbs started going off like above my head. Context and lack of context is huge. And I think that, going back to pretty much what everybody said, Christina, you've touched on it a few times just in terms of like how an organization is set up, how people feel like they can communicate. There needs to be somebody in that room who feels comfortable saying, is this what you want, or is this what you think is best for the organization accomplishing its vision? And I've been in rooms where that has been answered, and there is somebody who does that. I've been in rooms where there hasn't. The ones where it hasn't is where people feel disempowered, they feel disenfranchised, because in that situation, they're just doing work. They're doing work because somebody wants something but has failed to provide them the context for what it is that they want. I myself, without specifics, have done tons of work on a specific project and walked into a room thinking that it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And somebody's like, that's not what I want. It's like, well, you didn't tell me what you wanted. So, which one is it? Do you want me to do the work that I think is best for us to accomplish our vision and mission? Or do you want something specific that you had in mind, and I'll just execute that? And those, it's a vague real life example, but it's specific to what Joanna said about context, because so much context is lacking in a lot of what is handed from, the top down.
I absolutely love that. And actually, I think also the thing I would like to add, I'm going to actually steal this from Alex and go back to you. The thing you said before, which I think is critical here too, is a sense of accountability, right? And ensuring that self-managed teams, that those are brought into your values, and most importantly, your leadership values, right? Your leadership tenets, your leadership principles, because that then forms your performance management, and it then becomes accountability. But like everything is dependent on other things. So again, I go back to your leadership development, making sure that your people and your leaders know what to expect from them, and then building that in, as well as honestly, even your hiring practices. It goes beyond that, right? Making sure that you're hiring the right people that are going to be able to thrive in this environment and so forth. So I love that you brought it back to accountability earlier, and I would say that here too, to reinforce that.
Yeah. The next
Also, Harley,
question.
I'm sorry, also, Harley, I apologize. I just had a thought as Christina was speaking and Alex, that people need those moments to really absorb, those moments of context to absorb and then translate ideas into action. And Alex said that so perfectly, because when you make room for that's when you transform partnership into an ownership mindset.
So that's so powerful. Now, stepping into early stage companies, maybe just a few employees, what is the best place for them to start building that culture of ownership?
I can jump in. I'll say right from the start, right? How often when you build organizations, culture is secondary. Culture is not secondary. It can be very, very intentionally designed. But first and foremost, you have to have a clear and actionable strategy. You can't build without that, right? And then being able to build, like we were talking about, everybody's mentioned those pieces about whether it's designing for the org, whether it's designing your operating model. All these pieces come into play, but it's never too early. But remember, culture does not sit by itself. It works collectively with other pieces of your structure and your foundation. And if the thought is earlier, then you can really embed it into your DNA and build that. But I think that's critical for self-managing teams because that's setting them up for success.
You'll hear a lot of leaders pretty much everywhere. At least in my career, and I've done this, a little bit short of 20 years. I've always had somebody say, "Hey, like we're recruiting for this role. I really love the idea of potentially bringing in somebody who has played, Division I sports or something like that." And again, with no context, Joanna. So they kind of just say it and they don't really say, why. But the reason that individuals look for people who played organized sports often is because they understand singular focus and what their participation means to the success of a team. And so that is super paramount when it comes to smaller teams, because if you were to walk into a room right now of, a startup with 10 people, you should be able to ask each of those 10 people, including, the leaders, what is your purpose here and what's our vision? And if they can't answer that, then you're having trouble building that culture of accountability. If you walked into, like any, sports organization right now, any sports team, and ask them the same question, say, we need to do what I need to do, what helps my team win this next game or win this championship. Companies, individuals and companies that have that same mindset are the ones that are the most successful.
It's an excellent observation. So does anybody have anything else to add on that before I go to the final lightning round question? All right, guys. So this one, after you answer, I'd love to have everyone give the opportunity to share briefly the best way for the audience to connect with you after the show, whether it's connecting with you online or if you've got an item of value you want to share. Please feel free to share that after you answer this quick question for everyone out there who's in business leadership. What is your number one piece of advice for them to take action now to help their team think like owners and not task doers? And Christina, we'll start with you. Oh, muted.
Apologize for that. To answer that, I think if you want a team that thinks like owners, start by hiring an HR leader who thinks like a business partner to help you to create that.
And how can people connect with you, Christina?
I apologize. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Thankfully, I am the only Christina Karczyk. Never mind when you add my secondary last name, Erin. So I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Up to you, Alex.
So I think probably, man, I'm definitely not going to say hire a good HR leader. That's just self-aggrandizing. But I will say that have a conversation with all of your leaders that you want to empower and ask them straight up, am I giving you enough leeway? Am I putting you in the position that you feel like you are, owning your role, that you feel like you understand the accountability of your role? And if either of those answers is no, immediately ask, how can I do that for you? Or like, let's start planning that. Let's start mapping it out. Heck, if we need to get, a whiteboard session for the next hour, like, let's figure out what we can do together to understand what our purpose here actually is. And yeah, the best way to find me is definitely on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's probably the best way.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Alex. And Joanna.
I would say trust before task, and just show up whole, show up present. It's so important to lead with presence before policy and clarity before control and trust before task. Because when you show up whole, your team learns how to lead from within and they have that ownership mindset. How you would connect with me, obviously I am on LinkedIn. However, I would connect with me on my website, which is www.elavanti, it's ELAVANTI, hr.com. Because there I do have access to a book that I just published called Present Leadership, which has a lot of content that we've reviewed today. And I also have a podcast that you can connect to through that website. So that has all my contact information and a link to my LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with me there as well. And thank you for that opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanna. All right,
Mhm.
Dr. Lori.
So I think that meetings should be held on Tuesdays because of Taco Tuesdays. I think when you have food at meetings, people participate more. But on a serious note, even though that's kind of true, and I'm a foodie, I will say that, and I love everyone on this call. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel like I've learned so much from everyone. I think being authentic is really important, and just giving people room to tell their story. Because I think as people tell their stories, you get to know if they understand the company mission, like Alex was talking about, where they are. And so, yeah, letting people be authentic and telling their story and modeling that as a leader, I think is really important. And I could be reached on LinkedIn.
All right. Thank you all to our amazing panelists for such powerful insights and practical strategies today. I know I've taken many notes and have some great things I'm going to start implementing from our conversations today. And to everyone joining us, thank you for investing your time today. Remember, your next level of growth doesn't come from working harder. It comes from empowering smarter. And if you're ready to free yourself from being the bottleneck and build the kind of strategic support systems that scales with you, I'd love to invite our audience to our free masterclass called Delegate to Dominate. You can watch it and unlock a special bonus offer just for our panel viewers at workergenix.com/bonus-masterclass. And we will see you all on the next Executive Edge Live. Thank you, everyone.